to the Fearless Females Voice podcast, where women's stories and experiences are shared in order to empower and inspire others. On this episode, I am joined by Shalina Micheal, who runs her own events business. When I first met Shalina, I instantly clicked with her and was drawn to her energy. She spoke so passionately about what she did and what she stood for, and I knew that I had to have her on this podcast. Shalina has worked in the events industry for over 17 years and had a senior leadership position in the corporate world. She had faced many challenges along the way and eventually decided to leave the corporate world and start her own business doing something she loved. It was a big shift in lifestyle and mindset of which she rose to the occasion and is now running a successful company. Shalina talks to us about her story of how she got into her industry, including her past experiences with education whilst growing up, the challenges she faced as an ethnic woman with her male colleagues, the struggles of starting her own business, and balancing her family and career. She also throws in snippets of her travel stints which she did, and you all know that I'm a really big fan of this. I loved speaking to Shalina about her story, which is just incredible. I'm sure you'll really enjoy the listen, so without further ado, let's get stuck in. Thank you so much for coming on. And I know that you've built a really strong career and then you've moved into your business. So you started a new business. And I think it's really courageous to do that. It's such a bold move to go from a corporate role to then starting something on your own, because you are then alone. So I think that really was a fearless step. So can you tell us, what does being a fearless female mean to you?
I think in a nutshell, you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. For me, I've always tried to make a conscious effort to push my own boundaries, because like most people, we all have our own fears. And for me, a fearless female is just constantly trying to push your own boundaries and do things that are outside of your comfort zone. An example of that is exactly where I am now, having spent 17 years in corporate and then deciding one day, I think it's time for me to go in it alone. It comes with so many worries, right? The risk of compromising your salary, monthly. When you work in corporate and you earn a good salary, irrespective of whether you and your team are delivering on your objectives, you still get paid at the end of the day.
Exactly.
You don't have that luxury when you go in it alone. So there was definitely that fear, particularly when, I have a mortgage, I have a family, I have responsibilities. There isn't that buffer. You sort of got to make it happen. But I think part of my character, and some of my friends tell me, ever since I was young, I've always sort of just gone out of my way to make things happen, and I'm sure there's a number of reasons as to why I've always been that way in terms of my personality, to just go in it alone, take that risk, ride or die mentality, I think all of that comes with being fearless, but everyone has their reasons behind being fearless for sure.
I love that. And I want to touch more about your story of the transition of you going into your business, but let's start with your corporate role. So you said it was 17 years of being in a corporate role. Can you tell us about your career? So how it started and why you got into what you were doing?
Yes. So, rewinding time a little bit, I have always been a proactive individual. By that, I mean, I'm quite hands-on and I don't stop moving. I'm one of those overly busy people. So when I had to make a choice about going to university or just throwing myself into the world of work, my intentions were I would have preferred to just throw myself into work. However, coming from a cultural background where my mum is from the Philippines, my dad is from Bangladesh, when you come from a working class background, what I've realized is education is such a big message. And the reason why education is such a big message, aside from the obvious and being qualified and taking you down a path of opportunity, is because for me, my parents really pushed me hard to get an education because they missed out on that. And therefore it held them back achieving certain things that they did in their life. And as a parent, and now I can speak, from a place where I understand how they feel because I have a 2-year-old daughter, I probably would encourage my daughter the same, because, my parents wanted me to have a different life to the life they had. You know, they still to this day work extremely hard, and they'll never stop. That's ingrained into their DNA. And I think I've taken a lot of that personality through my life because I've seen how hard they've worked and how humble they are and how much love they were able to sort of give us. No compromises there, you know? So I think that's sort of where things started. I started at university, not because I was doing it for me, but because I didn't want to let my family down. That's the reality. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm not the most academic individual. Like I said, I'm more hands-on, but I decided on pursuing a marketing degree because one thing I did realize about myself at that time was I didn't know what industry I wanted to be part of. I just knew I needed a role that was a bit more dynamic, and marketing for me meant you would be meeting people, you had a platform to be creative, you could come up with concepts and ideas, and you could work across so many different industry sectors. So that was fundamentally the reason why I started in marketing. After I graduated, I applied for marketing roles, all of which ended up being sales roles. So they would advertise, and this is old school, you know, like I wasn't looking for jobs on Google like people are now, or through any specific types of marketing agencies. I was literally circling stuff in the paper. I'm really showing my age now. I was circling stuff. I was asking people. I was like walking down, handing out CVs and turning up on people's doorsteps, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Looking for jobs. I mean, I've worked ever since I was 15. I was in retail when I was 15 years old. And I've always worked, and I've always had like 2 jobs. Even when I graduated university, I was working. I got my first job in publishing. So after having applied for marketing jobs, I ended up taking a sales job because beggars can't be choosers when you've left university and you're a graduate. And I spent 8 years publishing for the events industry. And that's how I started in the events industry, but on the flip other side. So I was publishing everything from printed show guides, lanyards, digital newsletters, and I was working with pretty much every big exhibition house in the UK. And we were publishing for events that were taking place abroad. So in my early 20s, I had my little suitcase and I was, you know, flown out to Cannes for a long, you know, a few days for, let's say, for example, the International Luxury Travel Market exhibition. We did the Gadget Show, Country Living, baby shows, wedding shows, you name it.
Sounds glamorous.
Pretty much everywhere. Do you know, people say that, but when you're literally flying in and flying out,
is that all it was?
Holiday, you're literally flying in, you're running around exhibitions, you're networking and doing your job effectively. You're selling, you're making sure that everyone's happy with the advertising that you've published in whatever publication, you're building relationships, and then you're basically out the door. So it was actually really tiring. The most glamorous part were the exhibitor parties, because they definitely, they were insane. But the other thing to remember is when you're in your early 20s and you've just graduated university and you're thrown into that world, it's also extremely intimidating.
Yeah.
You know? From the exhibition world, I was headhunted by an incredible guy who was portfolio director for one of our exhibitions that we were publishing for. So he brought me in as head of sales to the exhibition world. So I was running the luxury travel fair that sat alongside Spirit of Christmas. That was an annual event with Condé Nast Traveller magazine, and also the destination show. So at that point, I was head of sales, managing a sales team for the exhibition side. So I moved away from publishing. I then decided to go traveling for a few months. That's a whole nother story within itself.
Is the travels as part of your work, or just independent?
No,
your own travels?
Independently. I mean, that's a whole nother story. It came with some good, some bad, some ugly. And I know you've done a lot of traveling yourself.
Did you go on your own?
I didn't. I went with an ex-partner, and I also know you have stories about, you know.
I sure do.
Yeah, so I've definitely got a few of those. That feels like a wine conversation needing to be had. But the long and short is, you know, when I decided to go traveling, it was incredible for the experience, but there were a lot of hurdles along the way, aside from the obvious. My ex-partner is my ex-partner for a reason. However, the great things that came out of it were the experience and the stories. And although a lot of those stories were hard ones, by that I mean there was about four typhoons that hit Asia at the time, and I was traveling Asia. So I spent most of that 4 months, 4 months in and out of hotels, basically trying to just seek cover because it was just insane. So I didn't get to travel as much as I wanted to. There were certain destinations like Vietnam that we basically couldn't travel to because of the weather conditions. All flights were stopped and cancelled, and eventually I just felt like a disheveled mess on my journey. But with that came probably some of the most memorable experiences. They say some of the worst stories of your life tell the best stories.
Yeah.
So
and
I
also have learnings from
take
them
that.
as well.
Yeah, definitely. And at the time, although I was probably fearing for my life on some of those stories, I look back now and just think, oh my God, that was insane. And like I said, they're probably the most exciting stories to share.
Yeah. I love a good story, by the way, especially travel stories. They're my favorite. So I'll take you up on that wine offer.
Yeah, let's do it. I think we'd probably have a lot to share. I've definitely, through work and personal sort of interest in travel, I've definitely hit a few places. There's still a couple of continents I want to sort of venture around to a bit more, but yeah.
Which ones?
So South America.
Okay.
South America is another one. So my husband now and I were due to travel South America after we got married as part of our honeymoon. After we got married, yes, that would have been amazing. However, we basically fell pregnant a little bit sooner than anticipated after we got married, and therefore our whole South America plan basically got axed, and we ended up going to the Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi and then spending
our time
good. Sunning. It was incredible. It was my first time, and my husband's a huge Formula One head, and I absolutely loved it. It was the best. I was dragging my big pregnant belly around the Grand Prix with all the loud noise. The baby was not happy with all the vibrations, but no, it was good. But going back to your original question then about sort of how I got into the industry, after traveling, I came back, and it was a scary time because I'd basically spent all of my money. And I've always been very good with saving and being logical and rational and having a plan. So that was a big risk for me. And I know a lot of people do it and think, yeah, let's do it and just spend all the money and we come back. Whereas I didn't function like that on a day-to-day. I was very much about making sure family were going to be okay. So if I was going to spend, make sure that there's still money in the bank. That's part of the challenging side of my travel stories. But again, that's a wine conversation. But the long and short is when I came back quite vulnerable. I came back feeling a little bit lost, feeling like, gosh, that wasn't how I anticipated traveling to be, right?
Do you think that's because of the disasters that were there with the typhoons?
Both. Okay. It was very difficult traveling with a partner. And sort of seeing traits and characteristics that perhaps you'd not seen before.
Yeah, I've had that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I think it depends on the partner as well. So right now, I've done traveling with my ex-partner as well. Yeah. And it was, I struggled as well. Like, you do find out new things, and it can, you've both got your individual paths that you want to take or an activity that you want to do, and it can be disastrous at times. But I've also been traveling with my now fiance, Akash, and we have the best time. He is the best travel partner. We are just aligned, and it's amazing. So I think it just depends on who you are going with, and almost like if you have that list of, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to get from it beforehand, so you know what the other expects. I don't have to do that with Akash. I think we just go and we have such a good time. Like, I just love it. I can't wait to get away with him again. But yes, I think it just depends.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've definitely found my travel buddy. One of my best friends, her and I have traveled so much together, and she's definitely my soulmate and travel partner. But when I met my husband and we started traveling, holidays were just part on part of our passion and interest. It's escapism, right? It's the adventure. It's the just waking up and saying, what shall we do today? And not necessarily having a plan. And that I realized I really enjoyed. And that was the part that sort of made me feel like, gosh, you're bringing out some really great qualities in me. I used to be very, let's have a plan, let's figure out, let's be logical.
Like me.
Whereas, right? And now it was like, no, let's just wake up. Let's just like see where the world takes us,
Yes.
So that's very much part of who I am now. But it takes sometimes meeting the right person to also bring out that side of you. And although I have had that with friends, I'd not had that before with a partner.
Okay.
And so that was a really nice, now I can confidently say I have both. I absolutely love traveling like you, cannot wait to get on a plane. My daughter has been on enough plane journeys already, and she's only 2 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, and she's brilliant traveling on a plane. You never really know how your child's going to be on a plane until you put them on there. She's been amazing. Touch wood, she's been incredible to fly with. So I can't wait. And I guess coming back to London and sort of settling back in, immediately my brain said, right, I've got to find work now. Even though the plan was to travel for a bit longer, I came back and I sort of find with work, it's a bit of escapism for me. I realize I'm the kind of person that needs that sort of focus and purpose. But I also, in order to bring out the best in me, I need to do something that means something to me. You know,
having a purpose.
Having a purpose is so important to me. Sometimes I say to myself when I'm absolutely exhausted, God, I just want a day to just do nothing. And honestly, that day comes once in a blue moon. That day comes and I don't know what to do with myself. Immediately I'm going, right, I could do the washing, I could reorganize that, I could do that. And my husband's like, listen, stop doing that. What is wrong with you? Like, pick a series on Netflix and just sit there. The cleaning and the tidying and the whatever is not going anywhere. So yeah.
Do you find it hard to relax on your days off then? Because your mind is almost ticking on work and thinking.
The pandemic has trained me to do that.
Okay.
So I think prior to the pandemic, life is always so busy, with or without my daughter. Prior to me even having a baby, I was always one of those people that would have at least 5 things that I'd agree to in the day, whether it was client, work, personal, friends, family. I was all over the place. I'd literally hit all 4 corners of London in a day, come back. And I don't know where I used to get the energy from. I look back and think, and I would still go clubbing. And I'd do it the entire day in 4-inch stiletto heels, can I just add?
Wow.
Now during the past year, I probably put heels on maybe twice. And even then they're in my bag. So I will commute in my trainers and I will throw my heels on.
I know when we met, that was the case. You had your trainers on and you said, oh, I've got my heels in my bag. I remember that.
Exactly. So that's been a huge change for me. I think most people in the events industry who have worked with me will tell you she did everything in heels. I've run outdoor music and festivals in heels for 12 hours a day, tippy-toeing over the mud, entertaining clients, hauling furniture in VIP lounges, like you name it, managing teams. That's sort of the lifestyle I used to have. But I think the change for me, I came back, I landed a job in outdoor music and food festivals. So I was one of the organisers for Jamie Oliver's big festival, Taste of London in Regent's Park. At the time, we were also running Golf Live, Top Gear Live. And then we got bought by an American company, IMG first. We got bought by IMG. We moved to Chiswick. Everything changed there. I was used to being part of a smaller boutique type organization that was fun and vibrant, and everyone had the sort of freedom to sort of think creatively and contribute to the growth of the events that we were delivering. And then you move into the corporate sector and it was weird. It was everybody was, I mean, we were basically the what do you call it? We were like the naughty kids of the room, almost. You could call it that, right? We were the loudest of the bunch. We were the most sociable. We were outgoing. And I remember complaints being made from the other departments about how loud we were as a team. So all of a sudden, it was like, right, okay, gosh, we're part of this larger corporate company now. So that change in environment was very different to what I was used to, because every role that I had prior had that really fun, cultural, interactive, creative vibe about it.
Yeah.
And
Sounds a
then
bit suppressive. Like you're not able to
yeah,
unleash and just do your thing and be as creative as
yeah,
you want.
for sure. For sure. I mean, we stood out for lots of different reasons. We were a very multicultural team as well. There were about 40 of us, I would say, and everyone came from all walks of life, different cultures and races. And I've always loved that. I was born and bred in Camden. And so I was lucky enough to always be around people who came from different faiths, different cultures, different backgrounds. And what that meant for me is that I've always found it very easy to talk to people, irrespective of your age, your background, your status, your position and power, whatever.
Yeah.
I've always found it quite easy because I've been in that world. But what I found going into corporate sector, particularly with that organization, is I felt like we sort of stood out like a sore thumb, and not necessarily for all the most comfortable reasons. In that part of my career cycle, I was promoted to head of corporate hospitality, which came with its own changes, which gave me a different kind of kick up the bum career-wise, because in that position, not only was I one of the few females in sort of a managerial position, but I was also one of few ethnic females around that board table, talking about strategy and where we are financially and how we're going to drive the events and the business forward. And that had its pros and cons. So the cons were, I found myself in a very uncomfortable position, because around that table, I would describe the table as predominantly middle class, white, older men.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't come from that background. And that never bothered me. I would come into the meeting equally the same vibrant, hey everyone, how's everyone's weekend? Blah, blah, blah. But I found that the energy was just really different. So I found that, and maybe it wasn't, I don't believe it was on purpose, but I found that no one made as much effort as I did to interact around the board table before we started talking business. And I started.
Is that with each other? Sorry, interacting with each other, or just you particularly?
Just me.
Oh,
Just me.
okay.
So I'd walk into the room, and a lot of the time the conversation was around golf and, you know, things that I couldn't. And, you know, I know you come from an engineering background, right? And maybe you can relate to some of these things. But the reality is, talk to me about golf and I'll throw you something. I don't mind talking about golf. I may not know about it, but I'm open to hearing and I'm open to trying. You know, I've given golf a shot a few times. My husband loves golf. I've been to a women's golf day, and, you know, I really enjoyed it. I didn't realize I did. But my point is, when you become part of that type of a management team, you start looking around you. And I never had to look around me before, because I felt like I was in a really nice, even playing field with lots of different people. No one was particularly power hungry. No one threw their job titles around the room. Everyone could equally share, and it was open door, right? All of a sudden, that world took me to a place where I realized my opinions perhaps weren't being taken as seriously, or I didn't feel as comfortable to sort of share ideas because, you know, I just found that there was a lot of red tape. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to in corporate sector. Everything's down to, but how much money is that going to cost? You know, that's always the first thing. Well, how much is that going to cost? Or who's going to sponsor that? How are we going to deliver it? And blah, 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 blah. Everything always came down to the numbers. And I've always been a people's person. And managing my team I was very much mama hen, and I was fine with that title. You know, my team often called me mama hen because even when managing people, I see people as people. Everyone has a story and everyone has a background, right?
Mm.
And I've always told my teams that I was managing in events, if you are going to be sick, don't lie to me. Everyone's allowed to feel sick and not have to lie. If you're hungover, you're a human being, right? You're going to be hungover and then you've got to come into work the next day. I'd rather you call me and tell me, Shalina, I had a really crappy night. Please, can I have like the morning off, or can I don't mind that, because for me, team effort means we all have each other's back. And
Absolutely.
if the team that are functioning and are able to cover that team member's back once in a blue moon, so be it. Someone's going to need someone to cover their back at some point. So even to the way I managed the team, it was about people. So when I then having my style of working with people and working in organizations, because I was a very open book and I was about everyone doing the best job they could, because we respected each other, not because they were told to do well or told to hit their numbers. Everyone who worked in my team, we all equally pitched in. Even though I was running a team, it was important for me to lead by example and deliver those numbers. You know, I don't like that whole dictatorship style of management.
Yeah.
Then I had to move myself into the boardroom, and it was very, Shalina, what are the numbers? Shalina, how are we going to get to that number? There was never a how are you doing, right? There was not a what kind of challenges are you facing at the moment? How are you on managing your day to day? Do you need an extra resource? You know, how can we get to a bigger number? What is it that you need from us? You know, there was none of that sort of care and concern for employees when we then got brought into corporate sector. Literally everything was how much money.
And how did you deal with that more direct approach versus the personal approach? Because I know how I would feel in that situation, and I've been in that situation as well. But how did you deal with that?
At first, I'll be very honest with you, I sort of let myself down a little bit. So I then realized subconsciously, I then became the last person to enter that meeting room just to avoid the banter. And I would arrive into the room as we were about to just do what we were set out to do. And that's just to deliver the numbers, talk about the strategy, take the objectives away, and then I would manage my team and we would hit all of our targets in that way. And then after a while, I thought, you know what, like I'm not that person. Let me just remind myself who I am. I'm vibrant, I'm bubbly, I'm never intimidated by people, irrespective of your position, because you are just a person, as am I. I'm no better and you're no better than each other. That's my view. So I basically then started making a conscious effort to just go in and be me. Go in when I wanted to, banter, open up the conversation, talk to whomever, put myself forward to build that relationship. Because what you also realize in that position is your opinions are never going to matter unless you speak louder, you know, unless you put your insecurities or intimidations to one side and you say, do you know what, they're just people. Irrespective of whether they want to talk to me about personal stuff to build a relationship, I'm going to put myself forward. So I just had to make a mental shift and view my scenario very differently. And that's how I sort of changed things. And lo and behold, my relationships with those individuals did become closer. So that's a positive learning that I would probably encourage and share with everyone who might be in a similar position. But what I will say is, if I was talking to the industry and I was talking to the people on the other side of the table, I would say it takes two to tango. No one should ever have to feel that they have to go to those lengths to just function day to day and do your job. You know?
And you mentioned there were very few female and ethnic, especially board members. So when you walked into these meetings, were there any women around, or was it mainly you?
No, there were definitely strong women. But what I found throughout my career is for the few females, and this is the thing with the events industry is saturated with females, event managers, coordinators, ops teams, whatever. It is pretty much female heavy on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about managing directors, CEOs, vice presidents, the vast majority of those positions are held by men. Now, that's strange to me, because if the creative and the active workforce is made up of women, why are there not more women in director levels or managing director or CEO levels than there are men? That doesn't make sense to me. And that still doesn't make sense to me. And I would love to be able to find a way to change that. Is there a problem with corporate organizations and the decisions being made by men? And is it that women are sort of being sidelined? Is there a problem?
And it's common in a lot of industries as well. So it's not just just everywhere. There's not as many female leaders in the director positions, board member positions. There's just not as many.
There isn't. And also what I found, and I don't know if this was the same in engineering, but I also found that for the few women that were in manager or director level positions, they were fierce. They were fierce. Yes. Like they were the epitome of alpha female. And I have to be really honest with you, even when I have been in that position, it's just not part of my, I didn't like it. I didn't like that sort of attitude and that tone and that aggression, but I understood why, right?
Yes.
There's two sides.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. The women that are in the more senior positions, and it's almost maybe that front that they have to put on because they've gone through so much with their male colleagues that they have to make a stance. They have to show up in a different style or a different way, because that's definitely not my style. But from what I've seen, when I was in my engineering role, when I kind of worked my way up, I was then exposed to more kind of male figures, how you said, in your board members who just, they didn't really pay attention to me. They didn't want to take my opinions into account, even though I had very valid things to say. So then I was like, okay, well, I need to maybe show up in a different way. But that way was not me. I'm exactly how you said, the personal touch. I like to talk about, how was your weekend? And I'm that bubbly person entering the room, but I almost had to go into a more direct approach and be a bit more fierce in what I was saying. And it was that switch that made me think, okay, well, I'm in a different playing field now, right? So I need to be a bit different.
Yeah. And it's, it has its pros and cons. I love how I am today, and perhaps I wouldn't be wholly who I am today in terms of that element of fierceness, because you can be fierce, but you don't have to be cruel.
Yes.
You can be firm, but you don't have to be hard. You know what I mean? Like, there's a way in which you can put your point across and encourage your team to deliver the results the company needs without being alpha female, boss bitch, or people are scared of. That's not who I am. That's who I never want to be. But all of those things were such an amazing experience, because it taught me how I wanted to be. Right? It taught me how I wanted to be as a manager, as a director, how I wanted to lead a team, what I believe to be right and wrong. And you can only really establish that when you can see, or you're thrown into positions where you think that's just not okay. So the one thing that I will say is I've definitely never been afraid, and this goes back to the whole fearless thing. Don't ever be afraid to speak your mind. Don't ever be afraid to share your thoughts. I think particularly with English culture or British culture, let's talk about British culture. British culture, everyone's sort of scared to say the wrong thing. People don't want to say anything that's too political or too out there, and everyone treads on eggshells around lots of different things. Even if something bad's happening outside, let's be really honest, how many people would actually open their door to help somebody outside? Particularly in urban London, I grew up in a council flat in Kentish Town. I can honestly tell you, I when I was younger, yes, there was more of a community spirit. But if you think about now, if I was living in that environment again, I could honestly say I probably wouldn't know any of my neighbors, because how often do people in that setting actually talk to each other and look after each other? It's very different in urban London in terms
Yeah.
of the attitudes. There's a safety issue. There's a lot more concern. There's so much. But anyway, I'm digressing. But coming back to the fearless side, my point is, when you sort of come from those sort of environments, it gives you that foundation to say, I'm not scared to say what I need to say. It gives you a bit of a backbone, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I just sort of had to remind myself as to where I've come from, and that people are people, and you treat people with kindness, and you can still do your job, but you do it in the right way.
I love that. I love that you put your own spin on it, your own personalities in there as well, and you do things that you think are right, and you get the results, because you always will, right?
Yeah.
When you're yourself, it will work. You will get your results. So that's
I
great.
want to go to bed and actually have a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And I can only go to bed and have a good night's sleep if I believe that I have done what I believe,
Yeah.
you know?
So, Shalina, you now run your own business. If we take you away from the corporate world, can you tell us about your transition from the corporate world into starting your own business?
Gosh. So I guess the fundamental part was when I was running festivals, I started building a relationship with the hospitality industry. That sort of organically happened. You start getting to know restaurants, because I was running Taste of London, which was one of the biggest restaurant festivals in London, and globally. So I was headhunted by the Telegraph, to run their bespoke events division, which was a brand new division to the Telegraph. I accepted the job. I came back, handed in my notice. This is after having spent 7, 8 years working for that particular organization, running food and music festivals.
Mm-hmm.
And to my surprise, they rejected my resignation. I ended up staying.
Oh, I didn't know that was a
They didn't
thing.
want to lose me. Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. I handed in
Okay.
my resignation, and they said, that's really lovely, but how do we keep you? I was like, I didn't anticipate this conversation happening. What? And again, it goes back to, I spent a lot of my career feeling undervalued, right? So it just goes to show there was a lack of communication in the organization. There wasn't enough, Shalina, this is amazing. You're doing a great job. I actually felt like the only reason that I stayed there was because I absolutely loved my job, the event, and I loved my team. I
Mm.
did not ever want to abandon my team. So when I handed in my resignation, I handed it in thinking, you were going to go the usual route. They said no. I ended up staying. I stayed for my team. I stayed because the package, the opportunities, and the responsibilities that came with that was something that I thought would challenge me even further. So I stayed. Within that year, I was headhunted again by a restaurant called Park Chinois in Mayfair.
Yes, I've been
And
there. It's really nice.
right, it's insane. It's
Yeah.
insane. It's a very unique proposition. It's probably one of the most complex restaurants you will find in the hospitality scene, particularly around Mayfair. But it came with its challenges. That's me being wholly honest. I was very much used to working with a team that respected one another, that cared. We were in it together, and there was that real team spirit. And in hospitality, generally speaking, you can only function in hospitality if you have that team spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But I went from being very used to working 15-hour days when we were on site at festivals, so that was periodically through the year, to all of a sudden working 12, 15-hour days every day. I was burnt out. And I didn't anticipate that. I took the role of business development director. So my role with the restaurant was to deliver revenue around events and group bookings. How do we build a strategy that increases brand awareness?
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody at that time knew Park Chinois, unless you were a high net worth individual or ultra high net worth individual that wouldn't mind spending £1,000 on a shot, or wouldn't mind spending, £200 a head on a dining experience. Corporates in the local vicinity didn't even know who the brand were. to my surprise. So when I stepped in, that wasn't the expectation that I had. So it was a very exciting role to be able to say, right, we're going to go to market and we're going to create something really attractive, and we're going to grow our customer base, and we're going to reach out to a new demographic of clientele. So I absolutely loved that. But I just, after a year, it was like 12, 15-hour days. I found the culture very challenging in terms of the way the team sort of operated. It's a very stressful industry, hospitality.
Yeah,
You know,
I can imagine.
very stressful. And to function in that environment, I can sort of understand why the staff turnover in hospitality is actually quite fast. I think every restaurant will tell you it's a very incestuous industry, but the staff turnover is also really high. I'm used to working with companies for years before I move on. Publishing, I was there 8 years. 2 years I was in with exhibitions, running the travel events. And then I spent a further 7 to 8 years working in the outdoor musical festival scene. So you can see sort of on paper that I'm quite happy to progress and build and grow if I'm happy in the setting I'm in.
Yeah.
But hospitality was challenging for me. And the company was at a point where redundancies had to be made. And there were several directors, including myself, who had to go through a redundancy process. That was the first time I'd ever been made redundant in my career. And it actually came at the best time. Some would say the worst time, because a month later I was getting married in Ibiza.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That's
So,
not great timing on
yeah,
paper.
but on paper, it probably was the worst timing. However, that was the best timing for me, because I was able to actually focus on planning my wedding. I pretty much had about 6 weeks to plan this wedding in Ibiza, and actually enjoy it and not feel like I was going back to 15-hour days, stressed, overexhausted, tired. And I'm talking weekends as well. Like, this wasn't, when you're in hospitality, it's not a Monday to Friday proposition, 9 to 5. It, particularly when I was organizing, celebrity events or high-end parties that were exclusive hires at the venue, I'd be in at 9 and I'd leave there at 3 a.m. and then be back in at 9. It just sort of took its toll. So that experience, combined with all my years in corporate, took me to a place where I thought, right, I can either reach out to my network and get another job in corporate after I'm back from the wedding, or I can just take the plunge. And you know what? I just thought, again, push my own boundaries, just do it. You've wanted to do something on your own. I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Which is part of the reason why I sort of even manage my teams in a different way to the norm, right? I function day to day and we deliver on our objectives in a different way to the norm. So I just took the plunge. I was like, I've had enough. I want work-life balance. I want to work on my terms in my way. And I know I can do it. Like, I know I can do it. And at worst, if everything SHIT hits the fan, then you just go back and find a job, right?
Exactly. There's always something to fall back on.
We're lucky. We're in London. There are opportunities. And yes, there are so many people unemployed now. There are so many people who have had to take a step back, do jobs that they were never part of their career path. But the point is, at that time, pre-pandemic, that was my mentality. I thought, you know what, now or never, give it a go. So I started the business there, 2018.
What were some of your fears and how did you overcome them when you were thinking about, right, I'm going to go solo, I'm going to do my own thing and start this business?
Yeah. So my main fears came around, how do I make sure I can pay my mortgage and my bills, right? If my business isn't generating an income immediately, because it takes time. You've got to build your website, your brand, your strategy, your concept, go out to market, reach client, all of the normal stuff people go through in setting up a business. Those were my fears. In fact, that was my main fear. My main fear was, financially, am I going to cope? But my second fear came down to, what if I don't do well? right?
This
What
sounds
if
like
I don't?
imposter syndrome. It's almost like the self-doubt
Yeah,
that you have about starting something.
I had loads of that. I had loads of that. So how did I combat that? I had to just have a conversation with myself. I literally had to have a conversation with myself. And I've always been somebody that I don't like letting people down. And often what that meant was I did compromise a lot of where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be because I wanted to be there for other people first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to check myself and I said to myself, I'm flipping exhausted. Like I'm so exhausted. And actually, I'm fed up. I'm fed up of red tape. I'm fed up of being the person that goes out of their way to make a difference with all the boundaries and the red tape. And I just wanted to do it on my own terms. And I wanted to just work in a smart way. You know, people say work smart and you can work within your hours and all of that. Rubbish. When you work for corporate, you're working smart for them, which basically means you're still working over and above the hours, you're still delivering on their goals and their objectives, and it means I'm putting myself second. So if it was a now or never, I just had to just check myself, Chavni, like really do it, take the plunge. It's going to be scary, but it's okay. And I went through a period of, you know, a few months. I managed to land an amazing role consulting for Cole Office Restaurant in King's Cross with the restaurant team there. They are the best, like the best team. I opened the restaurant with them and I developed their events proposition. And we went to market and we drove revenue through group bookings and events. It's similar to what I was doing with Park Chinois, but I was doing it working for myself as a
On your own
consultant.
terms.
On my own terms. And they were incredible and so supportive of me too. I was very open with them. I told them all my fears. And, you know, the restaurant director there now, her and I are now very, very good friends, you know. And it was the beginning of the beginning of me not looking back.
Good.
I have no regrets. I am in such an amazing place where I'm just happy with my work-life balance. The pandemic has taught me to enjoy the simpler things in life, to enjoy the slower pace of life. I am relishing in the change.
I'm so glad. I literally feel the same. And that's how I have been as well since the pandemic hit us last year. It just feels so much more like I'm in control and I'm going at my own pace and doing things that I really love and spending time with those who I love and speaking to those who I love. It's just all about me and what makes me happy. I think that's really helped with my mindset.
Absolutely. It's a proper shift. It's a shift. I think until you push yourself to make those changes and take those risks, you never really know how you're going to feel. And let's be honest, I mean, I probably launched an events business at the worst time during a pandemic when the entire events industry was basically on their knees. But what I also learned in that time is the importance of relationships. And I'm just so grateful and so blessed that over the years, I've built some incredible relationships with amazing people who I met through business. But like I said, similarly to the feeling I had with you when I first met you, when you gravitate towards certain people, you just sort of stay in touch, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes a friendship as well as a business relationship.
Yeah.
That you can call each other. People can call me and say, Shalina, listen, this is what I'm thinking for this. What do you think? That costs nothing. You know, I don't run a rigid operation. I would say relationships have literally kept me afloat during the pandemic. Had it have not been for those relationships that I built, I probably wouldn't have had the events that I'm delivering now. I probably wouldn't have the relationships and the network that are basically keeping my business afloat now. You know, it's been amazing.
And that's another tip right there, that networking is key. Like go out there, speak to people, build relationships, maintain relationships. Yeah, I think it really does help for businesses.
And with relationships, I think, particularly in corporate, it's a very forced networking environment. There's a networking event that, you know, I'd have to send my team I've been to, and you're in a room full of corporates and no one really knows but everyone's just swapping business cards for the sake of swapping business cards. Networking is more than that, you know. And I think, God, if there is a masterclass for networking, I would love to be part of that, because that's a skill within itself that either I think you have or you don't have. And if you don't have, there are certainly tips and ways in which you can blossom in that environment.
100%. It's something that you can learn, definitely, how to actually approach people, networking, the kind of building of relationships. It's definitely something
Yeah.
that you can work on to get right. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But no, it's been an amazing journey. Up until now, I'm really enjoying the collaborations and partnerships and the meeting people that I want to work with,
Yeah.
right? That's the joy. I've always said to myself, and I say this to clients often, when you go in it alone, you're choosing to work 80 hours a week to give up, in order to give up working for somebody else on a 40-hour week. That sounds absurd to some people, but that 80-hour week I do in my time, on my terms, and I choose to work with people that I want to work with, you know?
Yeah. The
And it's
beauty of
very,
working for yourself and having your own thing. So that's great.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
can you tell us what's next for you?
So next for me are a couple of things. Of course, the business is now at a place where I'm trying to come out of the pandemic, and now is an opportunity to grow my business further.
Mm-hmm.
I am very passionate about events, yes, but my actual passions within events is about creating bespoke experiences to help businesses grow and achieve on their objectives. There are lots of global event agencies out there that put together amazing award ceremonies and conferences and networking events and all of that good stuff. But I think there is a market out there. And what I'm finding is there is a market and appetite for creating events that communicate your brand message effectively, that help deliver new customers, and help grow your business from a revenue perspective. So I'm working with different clients and brands at the minute to create specific events that achieve those objectives. And that's what my focus is. So I absolutely love working with startups. I love working with private clients. I love working with corporates as well. It's just a challenge. So I want to grow that. That's the one thing. And secondly, I have absolutely loved helping other businesses grow their business just by mentoring.
Oh,
So
amazing. I didn't know you
I
do
will
mentoring
be,
already.
I do. So that sort of happened organically, particularly around the pandemic. People didn't want to lose their business, right?
Mm.
And a lot of people are really great, particularly startups. People can't do everything. I can't do everything, you know, but I know what I'm good at. And the same with lots of other business owners. They're great at coming up with an incredible product or a service or a concept, but then how do you market that? How do you generate customers? How do you
Yeah.
actually sell the damn thing? And then who do you go to and how do you go to them? So I've sort of just organically been advising and helping clients and connecting. I connect people all day long. You know, it costs me nothing and it costs them nothing for me to say, listen, you need to speak to this person because they can help you, and vice versa. So I've been doing a lot of connecting for people over the course of the pandemic, and that's been amazing. I love that from the bottom of my heart. I've really enjoyed seeing people grow and develop as a result of that. But officially, I am wanting to mentor, and that is part of my next steps outside of business. It's mentoring, continuing to help people in their businesses grow.
I love that. It's so good to give back. That's something that I love doing as well, just helping and
Yeah,
supporting other women specifically as well. But yeah, and just mentoring, guiding, giving advice, anything that I can do to help. I really like that. I
yeah,
want to see other women flourish and be at their best.
completely. And championing other businesses. I think as a new business
Yeah.
still, I still consider myself a new business. As a new business, you know, it can be very daunting. It can be lonely at times. That's the reality, right? That's the other big sort of change. You go
Yeah.
from having people around you constantly, suppliers, contractors, your team, management, everything, to then deciding to work at home in my space with no one around me. But, you know, it's had its pros and cons. But I think the beauty and the positives with that is I can choose who I want to talk to. I
Yeah.
can choose to build a network and a team who don't work for me, but they work with me to deliver on every event and every project I have. So that's been incredible.
I'm so, so glad. And Shalina, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. And it's been so good
Thank you
hearing
for
about your
having
story.
me.
And I wish you the best of luck with your business.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
amazing
you
what you're
so
doing.
much. Thank you so, so much. Watch this space.
Yes.
We're going to be doing some really fun, incredible things. And, let's just keep talking.
Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Be sure to join our Facebook group called Fearless Females and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye for now.